Usually when we were talking about making a diagnosis, whether it is medical, historical, or even systemic, there is this expectation of absolute precision, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, exactly. Like engineering, basically.
Right. It is like you break your arm, the X-ray shows that jagged white line on the film, and the doctor just points at it and says, there it is, broken.
Because it is entirely binary, black and white. It is deeply comforting because it is visible to the eye.
Exactly. But the moment you were stepping into the world of ancient Indian history or mythological lineages, suddenly that X-ray machine is completely useless.
Oh, 100%. You are looking at a historical landscape that utterly refuses to fit into neat clinical little boxes.
You are looking at a reality where mythology, geography, law, and quantum-level psychology are all woven into a single fabric only.
Which is incredibly daunting, actually, if you were looking for very simple answers. But it is exactly in those complex intersections that the most profound human discoveries are made. No.
And that is exactly what we are having in front of us today. For you, the learner. We have a stack of sources today that is so incredibly diverse, it almost feels like a contradiction, actually.
He has a massive spread.
We are looking at an energetic YouTube vlog exploring a hidden muddy forest temple in Assam. Then we have ancient Sanskrit treatises. We have academic management papers from modern business journals. And we have vast mythological encyclopedias.
So basically, we are covering the entire spectrum of human knowledge here.
Yes, exactly. And our mission for you today, as we dive deep into this material together, is to deconstruct the multidimensional legacy of one of ancient India's most fascinating figures. We are talking about Sage Vashistha.
See, in an era like ours, where you are constantly facing this massive information overload, Vashistha represents something very vital.
What do you mean by that?
He is the ultimate synthesizer of knowledge. He's the perfect guide if you are trying to find the signal in all this noise. Because his influence doesn't just stay in a dusty book.
Right. It is everywhere.
It stretches from the physical geography of the subcontinent, up to the stars in the night sky, deep into human psychology, and then, remarkably, straight into modern corporate boardrooms.
So let us jump right into the origins of Vashistha, because reading through his background, I was totally struck by the sheer scale of his intellect.
He is a towering figure right from birth.
Exactly. He wasn't just a wise old man, you see. He was born into an absolute powerhouse of a family. He was the son of Sage Kanva, who is widely known as Sage VS.
The compiler of the Mahabharata itself?
Yes, and his mother was Satyavati. And from the very beginning, he was an absolute prodigy. The texts are mentioning that he mastered the Vedas, astrology, medicine, and music at a remarkably young age.
And we really need to pause here and consider what mastery meant in that specific historical context, isn't it?
Because it's not just getting a degree.
Not at all. Mastering medicine, or Ayurveda, meant understanding the intricate botanical properties of thousands of plants. It meant surgical techniques and the holistic balance of human physiology.
And astrology.
That meant highly complex mathematics and observational astronomy without modern instruments. To hold all of that in one mind at a young age is staggering, actually.
But what is truly fascinating here is how he applied it. We often carry this romanticized image of ancient Indian sages.
Yes, sitting in a Himalayan cave, completely detached from the messy realities of the world.
Exactly. But Vashistha was the exact opposite of that. The sources are referring to him as an internuncio.
Yes, an internuncio. It is a brilliant word for his role.
What exactly does that encompass in this context?
It basically means he is the ultimate diplomat, the family priest, and the prime minister all rolled into one. He wasn't retreating from society. He was actively architecting it.
He was the guiding force for the glorious Ikshvaku dynasty. He was deeply practically embedded in statecraft.
So let us trace this Ikshvaku lineage, because the excerpt we have from the Ramayana detailing this cosmic genealogy is just beautiful.
Yes, it is the exact lineage that Vashistha himself narrates at Lord Rama's wedding to Sita.
Picture the scene, actually. It is a massive royal assembly. King Janaka is there, his brother Kushatvaja is there.
Now, it is an adjunctive custom in Indian marriages to list the ancestors of the bride and groom, isn't it? To establish the gotra, the lineage, to ensure everything is auspicious.
Yes, but today, people might cite 3, maybe 4 preceding generations at most.
Right. But Vashistha stands up and traces Rama's lineage back to the literal creation of the universe.
His memory is serving as the living archive of the civilization.
He starts with the unprovable, the Avyakta, or Vishnu. Then from this unprovable essence comes Brahma, whom he describes as timeless, changeless, and perishless.
It is a cosmic starting point.
From Brahma, Maharishi is begotten. Kashyapa is the son of Marichi. The sun is begotten from Kashyapa. Manu is the son of the sun. And from Manu, we finally get Ikshvaku, the first king of Ayodhya.
If we are connecting this to the bigger philosophical picture, the text makes a very profound point right here at the beginning.
What point is that?
It notes that from the viewpoint of mythology, the Ramayana has no place for a featureless absolute.
Oh, like a totally abstract concept of God.
Exactly. In the Advaita Vedanta tradition, there is the concept of Nirgu Brahma, meaning God without any attributes, purely abstract.
Right.
But the poet Valmiki's initial questions to the divine sage Narada include the phrase Kogatavan. He is actively looking for a Saguta Brahma.
Meaning an absolute with tangible attributes. A divinity that interacts with human history.
Yes, exactly. So when Vashistha starts with Vishnu as this all-pervading, unprovable entity, he is establishing that the ultimate cosmic reality isn't just an abstract equation.
It is a force that actively participates in the bloodline of human kings.
Exactly.
And what a bloodline it is. The stories embedded in this lineage are wild, actually. They are incredibly specific and surprisingly brutal.
Yes, take the story of King Sagara, for example.
That one blew my mind. The story of Sagara is a perfect illustration of how ancient texts weave geopolitics, human frailty, and divine intervention into one narrative, isn't it?
It grounds the mythology in very recognizable human behavior.
So King Asita, who is one of the rulers in this line, gets dethroned by a coalition of his adversaries, the Haihayas, the Talajangas, and the Chashabindis.
He is utterly defeated.
Utterly. He retreats to the Himalayas and actually passes away there in exile. Now his two wives are pregnant at the time of his death, and they seek refuge with sage Sayavana.
But here is where the narrative turns into an absolute psychological thriller, actually.
Yes. One wife is so consumed by insecurity, she actually poisons the other wife's food to cause an abortion.
It is a stark reminder that even within these divine lineages, the baseline of human jealousy and political ruthlessness is intensely present.
But sage Sayavana steps in and prophesies that the poisoned queen will not miscarry. Instead, she will give birth to a mighty son, and this son will be born literally with the poison inside him.
And that son is Sagara.
Yes. Sayama takes him in, rears him, trains him in the arts of kingcraft, and eventually accords him the Agnya Astra.
Which are described as fire missiles or incendiary weapons.
Wait, like ancient nuclear weapons?
Well, the Agnya Astra is fascinating because it implies a level of advanced martial technology or alchemy controlled by the sages and handed down only to those who possess the right lineage and temperament.
So Sagara isn't just given a sword. He is given weapons of mass destruction by his spiritual mentor.
Exactly. And armed with these weapons, Sagara reclaims the kingdom and absolutely drives out the adversaries.
But here's the detail that stopped me in my tracks while I was reading.
Yeah.
When he defeats the Yavanas, the Shakas, and the Pallavas, he doesn't just slaughter them.
No, he does something much more culturally devastating.
He strips them of their Kshatriyahood, their warrior status, by forcibly altering their hair.
Yes, the tonsuring.
He makes the Yavanas tonsured, completely bald. He leaves the Shakas half tonsured, and he forces the Pallavas to walk around with unkempt, shaggy hair.
It is a brilliant, bloodless form of cultural subjugation, actually. You have to understand that in ancient Indian society, hair was deeply tied to caste, status, and identity.
Right, like the warrior's top knot.
Yes, the shika. It was a symbol of their honor and their adherence to Vedic rituals. By forcibly altering their grooming, Sagara is permanently marking them as defeated.
So he is effectively excommunicating them from the warrior class without having to commit mass genocide.
It is psychological warfare masquerading as a grooming mandate.
That makes so much sense. It is a permanent visual marker of defeat. And then, further down the lineage, you have the story of King Pravrita, who is also known as Kalmashapada.
Ah, yes, the arrogant king.
He was a great king, but immensely arrogant. And he clashes with Vashistha. Vashistha actually curses him to become a human flesh-eater, a cannibal.
Yes, the curse of the Rakshasa, a demonized state of being.
So Pravrita, furious, takes mystic water into his hand, preparing to counter-curse Vashistha. But his wife, Madhyanti, is devout and wise. She literally stops his hand.
She tells him, do not challenge Vashistha. You cannot win against the cosmic order.
Recognizing she is right, but unable to simply uninvoke the mystic water, Pravrita drops the accursed water onto his own feet.
The dark magic blemishes his feet permanently.
Which is how he earns the name Kalmashapada, meaning blemished feet. Okay, I have to push back here, though. I am trying to reconcile these two images in my head.
I am understanding where you were going with this.
On one hand, Vashistha is representing the ultimate symbol of spiritual detachment, the supreme sage. On the other hand, he is deeply entrenched in brutal court politics, throwing around curses that turn kings into literal flesh-eaters.
It sounds like pure, unadulterated political power brokering, isn't it?
Yes. How is this spiritual?
That is exactly the friction that makes Vashistha so important, and it is a very valid pushback. If you view spirituality through a purely modern monastic lens, then Vashistha makes no sense.
Right, where a holy person is supposed to be quiet and passive.
Exactly, removed from the physical world. But ancient Indian philosophy operates on the concept of dharma.
Dharma meaning duty.
Duty, righteousness, but more accurately, the fundamental order of the universe. In this worldview, the physical world and the spiritual world are not two separate rooms, they're the exact same space.
So his job isn't to escape the world.
No, his role is to steer it. Kings possessed immense, terrifying martial and temporal power. If a king becomes arrogant, cruel, or unhinged from dharma, the suffering of the masses is catastrophic.
Therefore, the sage must possess a spiritual power that actually supersedes the king's physical power.
Precisely. Vashistha's involvement in court politics and even his devastating curses function as the ultimate checks and balances system for the monarchy.
He ensures that absolute power does not corrupt absolutely because the king always knows that Vashistha is watching.
Exactly.
So he is the supreme constitutional court, basically, but armed with cosmic energy instead of just gavels.
That is a brilliant way to put it. And this dynamic, this clash between temporal military power and spiritual authority, is most vividly illustrated in his epic rivalry with sage Vishwamitra.
Oh, this rivalry is legendary, and it starts over something that seems almost deceptively simple.
Very simple, actually.
Vishwamitra, at this time, is not a sage. He's a powerful king, the ruler of Kannauj. He is out with his massive army, touring his domains, and he decides to visit Vashistha's ashram in the forest.
Vashistha, being the perfect host, feeds this entire army.
Right. And Vishwamitra is astounded. He discovers that Vashistha possesses Kamtenu, the divine, wish-fulfilling cow that emerged from the churning of the cosmic ocean.
A cow that represents infinite resources, infinite sustenance.
So Vishwamitra, being a king, naturally says, I want that cow. A treasure like that belongs in a royal palace, not a forest hermitage.
He demands Kamtenu.
And Vashistha politely but firmly refuses, knowing the cow is a divine trust, not a piece of royal property.
See, a king of that era is simply not used to hearing the word no, especially not from a man wearing bark garments living in the woods.
Right. So Vishwamitra decides to take it by force. He orders his army to seize Kamtenu.
And according to the glorious Hinduism source we reviewed, Kamtenu herself is distressed.
She turns to Vashistha and asks, why are you not protecting me? Why are you not fighting back?
And Vashistha says, I am a Brahmin, a man of peace and spirit. I cannot fight vast armies of swords and chariots.
So Kamtenu, infused with Vashistha's spiritual aura, takes matters into her own hands. She literally creates warriors out of her own physical body.
The visual imagery in this text is completely staggering, actually, and it is rich with metaphorical meaning.
It really is. The text says Palava spring from her body, completely decimating Vishwamitra's forces.
Vishwamitra, who is a formidable warrior, slaughters them, but Kamtenu just makes more.
Yes. She creates Kampojas from her mouth, Shakyavanas from her udders, and Kirtakas, Haritas, and Malekas from her pores.
From her pores.
It is an endless biological fountain of defensive warriors.
Let's break down what is actually happening here conceptually. Vishwamitra represents the absolute pinnacle of material finite power.
Right, an army is depletable.
Exactly. It requires supply lines, morale, rations, and rest. Kamtenu, powered by Vashistha's asceticism, represents spiritual providence. It is infinite.
You cannot exhaust the source of creation.
The text is literally demonstrating that brute force will always eventually exhaust itself against true spiritual resilience.
And it culminates in a terrifying climax. Vishwamitra's sons, seeing their army being destroyed, fiercely rush the new divine army.
Finally, Vashistha steps in.
He doesn't pick up a weapon. He simply utters one single syllable and turns Vishwamitra's sons into ashes. Just one sound.
This is a crucial element of ancient Indian metaphysics, the power of sound, or mantra.
So the sound itself is a weapon.
In this tradition, the universe is fundamentally constructed of acoustic vibrations. To speak a perfectly calibrated syllable, backed by decades of intense tapasya, is to literally alter the atomic structure of reality.
Vashistha isn't using a physical weapon, he is editing the code of the physical world.
Exactly. It is devastating.
Vishwamitra is left utterly broken. His army is gone, his sons are gone, his pride is entirely shattered. But the true climax of this story, the part that defines Vashistha's legacy, isn't the destruction.
It is what happens right after. Because if Vashistha were merely a rival politician, he would have killed Vishwamitra and taken his kingdom.
Right. But he doesn't. Vishwamitra realizes that all his military might is completely worthless compared to Vashistha's spiritual power.
So he gives up his kingdom.
He becomes an ascetic, and he subjects himself to brutal, unimaginable penance for years, specifically to rival Vashistha.
And yet, after all of that, when Vishwamitra finally asks to be recognized as a Brahmarshi, the highest level of sage, who is the one that has to validate him?
Vashistha.
Yes, Vashistha, the man whose ashram Vishwamitra tried to destroy, accepts him. He teaches him.
He guides the man who tried to ruin him.
And that is the ultimate display of true leadership and spiritual supremacy.
Because he proves that his actions were never about personal ego or revenge.
Exactly. They were entirely about correcting an imbalance in Dharma. Once Vishwamitra aligns himself with truth, the rivalry dissolves into mutual respect.
It is a stunning narrative arc. And you would think a story this ancient, this mythological, would just exist in books.
And it does.
No. If we transition from the texts to the physical geography of modern India, we find that this isn't just an abstract myth. It is literally carved into the earth.
This requires us to shift our lens from mythology to historical migration and architecture.
So if Vashistha's power could decimate armies in the plains of North India, how did his influence somehow become the architectural foundation for a temple thousands of miles away in the extreme east?
It is a fascinating journey.
I want to set the scene for you listening, based on an incredibly vibrant YouTube vlog we analyzed from a channel called Life Reviewed Vlogs and Rides.
Dev, the vlogger, does a great job capturing the essence of it.
He really does.
Oh.
He takes us on a journey to the border of Assam and Meghalaya, right into the dense Garbanga forest.
The way he describes it, you can practically feel the humidity.
You are riding on these muddy, unpaved tracks. The air is completely clean, heavy with the scent of wet earth and dense vegetation. It is that very specific, nostalgic smell you get when you are standing at a roadside stall having a hot cup of tea right after a monsoon downpour.
It sounds intensely atmospheric, completely different from the dry plains where the Vishwamitra battles took place.
Completely different. And nestled right there in the outskirts of Guwahati city is the Vashistha Ashram.
There is a sacred spot there called the Vashistha Ganga, isn't it?
Yes, where three separate mountain streams, Sandhya, Lalita, and Kanta, merge into a single flow. The vlog shows monkeys and goats just roaming freely among the devotees.
I love the part with the goat.
Yes. The vlogger actually has a goat persistently following him around, simply because the goat knows he usually carries bananas in his bag. It is this wonderfully chaotic living ecosystem of devotion and nature.
It is a place where the barrier between the human, the animal, and the divine seems very porous. But what is truly remarkable from an anthropological perspective is this historical claim discussed in that vlog regarding how Vashistha actually got there.
Yes, the vlog delves into this deeply held ancient belief that Vashistha traveled all the way from the extinct Saraswati civilization to Assam to build this specific ashram.
Now, let us unpack the geography of that claim. The Saraswati civilization refers to the ancient settlements along the now dried-up Saraswati River,
Which is located essentially on the modern-day border of India and Pakistan, right?
Yeah.
In the extreme northwest.
Yes, and Assam is in the extreme northeast. We are talking about traversing virtually the entire expanse of the northern subcontinent, across deserts, massive river systems, and impenetrable jungles thousands of years ago.
It is mind-boggling. It is a transcontinental trek.
And what it highlights is something crucial about ancient India that we often forget: the existence of massive, deeply integrated knowledge networks.
So these sages were not stationary hermits.
Not at all. They were active vectors of culture, philosophy, and ritual practices. By moving from the Indus-Saraswati basin to the Brahmaputra basin, figures like Vashistha were actively weaving the subcontinent together into a cohesive civilizational unit.
Long before modern transport or centralized empires existed. And the physical evidence of this deep history is built right into the walls of the ashram itself. This is where the architectural story gets completely fascinating.
The structural history is amazing.
The temple structure that you see standing there today was rebuilt by the Ahom kings in the year 1764 or so, roughly 250 years ago. but they built it directly over ruins that archaeological evidence dates back to 1000 CE.
A full millennium ago.
Exactly. Now, the Ion dynasty had a very specific, distinct architectural style. They did not typically build with massive cut stone. They preferred using running mortar.
But the builders of this temple in 1764 did something incredibly smart and reverent.
Yes. They took the much older, pre-existing stone idols and carvings from the original 1000 CE ruins carvings that clearly display the intricate classical features of the Gupta and Pala architectural styles.
And they physically integrated them directly into the new brick walls.
It is a stunning example of syncretic architecture. They are making a deliberate choice not to bulldoze the past to build a future, but to literally encase the ancient legacy within the new structure.
It is preserving the core, basically.
When I was looking at the footage, a specific analogy came to my mind. It is exactly like an ancient architectural mashup.
How so?
It is like taking the core code of a vital, much older operating system and embedding it perfectly into entirely new hardware, just to ensure that the legacy data is never lost or corrupted.
The brick is the new hardware, but the stone carvings are the timeless code.
Exactly.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it, actually. The physical envelope evolves to survive the climate and the times, but the core data, the sacred essence, remains completely intact and functional.
And speaking of the sacred essence, the absolute centerpiece, the most unique feature of this temple, is the inverted shivling.
This is deeply symbolic.
The local legend dictates that the rock formation itself is Vashistha. The story goes that he meditated with such intensity that he physically merged with Lord Shiva, becoming one with the stone.
Let us explain the symbolism there. A shivling is typically an aniconic representation of Shiva, a pillar-like symbol of divine generative energy.
Right.
For it to be inverted, and for the myth to state that the devotee merged with the deity, is a profound theological statement.
It is the ultimate expression of non-duality carved directly into the bedrock.
The worshipper and the worshipped have become utterly indistinguishable from one another.
So we have traced his footprint from the mythological battles of the north to the extreme physical edges of the eastern forests. But remarkably, his footprint doesn't stop at the edge of the earth.
No, it goes much further.
From an inverted stone in a muddy riverbed, we now have to look up to the sky.
Because Vashistha's influence is truly cosmic.
He is literally one of the stars. In Indian astronomy, Vashistha is one of the Saptarshi, the seven sages.
In Western astronomy, we recognize this specific cluster of stars as the constellation Ursa Major, or the Big Dipper.
According to epic texts like the Mahabharata, the Saptarshi Mandal wasn't just a pretty shape in the sky. It was a crucial, functional guiding star system used for celestial navigation across the subcontinent.
And this is where the cross-pollination of ancient Indian thought becomes so undeniably beautiful.
Because it is not just a Hindu concept.
Exactly. Our sources point out a deeply moving parallel connection in Jainism.
Right. I was reading the encyclopedia excerpt on this, and it blew my mind. In Jainism, there is a historical account stating that during a particularly harsh, rainy season in the ancient city of Mathura, a deadly Mahamari, a severe pandemic, was ravaging the population.
People were dying. There was mass panic.
Then, 7 Riddhidhari Digambar saints, who were the sons of King Sri Nandan of Mathura, stepped in. They used their immense tapcharan, their strict ascetic penance, to completely halt the pandemic.
And because of this incredible act of salvation, they gained the title of Saptrishu.
Yes, and idols of these 7 saints were placed in all 4 directions of the city to protect it forever.
Now, a modern listener might wonder, how does ascetic penance stop a viral or bacterial plague?
Right, it sounds a bit magical.
We have to understand the mechanism of tapas in Jain and ancient Indian philosophy. Tapas, or penance, isn't just about depriving oneself to show devotion. It is believed to generate actual, palpable energy teshas.
So it's an active force.
Yes. When 7 highly realized masters engage in perfectly synchronized, rigorous spiritual discipline, the belief is that they physically alter the energetic resonance of the local environment. It is a purification of the psychic and physical atmosphere.
But there's a practical side too, no?
100%. On a deeply practical level, the presence of disciplined, fearless monks imposing strict rules of conduct, hygiene, and calm during a panic would inherently organize and protect the public health of a terrified city.
That is a phenomenal way to explain the HOW behind the mythology. It is a blend of energetic cleansing and profound civic leadership.
Exactly. And what this Jain parallel shows us is how the archetype of the seven guiding sages transcends any single religious dogma.
Whether they are literally stars guiding lost sailors across a dark ocean, or Hindu sages maintaining the cosmic order of dynasties, or Jain saints healing a desperately sick city.
The Saptarshi act as a universal, unshakable symbol of guidance, protection, and healing for humanity.
It speaks to a universal human need, doesn't it? The need to look up at the vast, dark, terrifying sky, find a recognizable pattern, and know, okay, I am not completely lost, someone is guiding this ship.
Beautifully put. The Vashisthas tradition did not solely rely on abstract guidance from the stars.
No, we got very practical.
While he was a cosmic figure, the school of thought bearing his name also produced incredibly grounded, highly practical blueprints for the daily functioning of human society.
Which brings us firmly back down to Earth, straight out of the cosmos and right into the very first courtrooms. We have to talk about the Vasistha Dharma Sutra.
This text is an absolute monolith in the history of Indian jurisprudence and sociology.
It is massive. It was composed somewhere between 300 BCE and 100 CE, and it contains exactly 1,038 sutras.
And there is a fascinating academic detail about its dating, actually.
Yes, what I found fascinating in our sources is how modern academics analyze it. Professor Patrick Olivelle, who is a prominent scholar of Sanskrit literature, dates the text closer to the 1st century CE.
And his reasoning is brilliant. He dates it based on the text's use of the pronoun I.
Why is that so significant?
That is a critical linguistic tell. Previous legal texts or edicts were often written in a detached, third-person, almost divine authoritative voice. They read like decrees from the heavens.
I see.
By using the pronoun I, the Vasistha Dharma Sutra reads like a highly personal, direct teaching guide from a master to a student. It brings the law down to a human, conversational level.
But the truly groundbreaking historical distinction of this text is what it says about evidence. The Vasistha Dharma Sutra is officially recognized as the oldest Indian text that mentions the explicit use of written evidence in judicial proceedings.
We are looking at the exact dawn of documented legal proof in the Indian subcontinent.
You have to consider how revolutionary that shift is. Before this, judicial systems relied almost entirely on oral testimony, character witnesses, and divine oaths.
If you had a land dispute, it was your word against your neighbors.
The introduction of written evidence marks a profound, irreversible evolution. It is the moment society realizes that human memory is fallible, that biases exist, and that a functional civilization requires an objective, external record of truth to administer justice fairly.
It is the invention of the paper trail, basically.
Exactly. And alongside this legal framework, the text lays down core, non-negotiable rules for all social classes.
These aren't just laws for the elite. These are universal duties.
It mandates speaking the truth, refraining from anger, giving gifts, or practicing charity, absolutely not killing living creatures, and fathering children to continue the societal line.
It is outlining the fundamental baseline ethics required to keep a highly complex, stratified society harmonious and functioning.
But while I was reading this, a very practical question popped into my head. Ancient India had dozens of texts, thousands of traditions, and localized customs. What happens when these ancient laws conflict?
That is always the problem with written law.
Right. I mean, texts contradict each other all the time. If the law says one thing, but local custom says another, how does a judge decide?
It is the ultimate question for any complex legal system, and the Vasistha Dharma Sutra provides a remarkably flexible, highly sophisticated, human-centric answer.
Tell me.
The text explicitly states that if the Vedas and the traditional texts offer no clear guidance on a specific issue, or if different texts are in direct conflict with one another, then the ultimate law is determined by observing the practices of cultured men free from desires and tangible motives.
Wait, really? So it basically says, if the rule book is confusing, go find the most unselfish, ethical person in the room and just do what they do.
Exactly. It is an astonishing admission of the limits of written law.
That is wild.
The authors knew that no text could anticipate every human dilemma. Ultimately, true justice cannot be automated. It relies on the applied, living wisdom of objective, ethically rigorous individuals who have no personal stake in the outcome.
It places human character above rigid dogma.
Yes, it is a staggering level of trust in human potential.
And if the Dharma Sutra is the rule book for external society, Vashista's legacy also provided the ultimate rule book for the internal world, the human mind.
This brings us to what scholars and seekers alike consider the absolute pinnacle of his philosophical legacy.
We are talking about the Yoga Vasistha. It is also known as the Maharamayana.
And just to give you an idea of the scale of this text, it is an epic all on its own. It is weighing in at 29,000 verses.
29,000. There is a shorter, more condensed version called the Laghu Yoga Vasistha, which is 6,000 verses. But the narrative setup for this text is what hooked me immediately.
It takes place before the action-packed events of the standard Ramayana.
Prince Rama is young. He has just returned from touring his kingdom, and he has fallen into a severe, paralyzing existential crisis.
He is experiencing profound clinical depression brought on by an acute awareness of mortality, the transient nature of wealth, and the inevitability of human suffering.
He refuses to eat. He refuses to perform his royal duties. So his father is terrified, and sage Vashistha is called in.
What follows is essentially a massive, multi-day philosophical counseling session.
It is an ancient psychological intervention.
It is ancient psychotherapy, deeply rooted in complex metaphysics. Now, from an academic standpoint, the text as we have it today is dated around the 11th to 14th century.
And it was likely composed on Pradyumna Hill in Srinagar, Kashmir.
Yes.
Yeah.
And because of where and when it was finalized, it is a stunning intellectual mosaic.
Our sources mention it blends several major schools of thought. Can you break those down? Because they sound incredibly dense.
Certainly. It seamlessly integrates Advaita Vedanta, which is the philosophy of ultimate non-duality.
The idea that the individual soul and the universal consciousness are exactly the same.
Yes. But remarkably, it also weaves in Mahayana Buddhism, particularly the concept of shunyata or emptiness, suggesting that the material world is a projection of the mind.
It includes Jain ethical frameworks too now.
It does. And crucially, because of its Kashmiri origin, it incorporates Kashmiri Shaivite Trika.
What exactly is Kashmiri Shaivite Trika?
Trika means threefold. It is a deeply mystical philosophy that posits reality consists of three elements. Shiva, which is the supreme consciousness, Shakti, the dynamic creative energy of Shiva, and Anu, the individual limited soul.
Okay, so three elements.
The goal is for the individual soul to recognize that it is, and always has been, entirely Shiva. The Yoga Vasistha takes all these highly complex, sometimes competing philosophies and synthesizes them into a single, cohesive manual for achieving mental liberation.
And the cultural reach of this manual was absolutely massive. It wasn't just a text for Hindu ascetics.
Not all.
During the Mughal Empire, under the direct orders of Emperors Akbar and Jahangir, this incredibly dense Sanskrit text was officially translated into Persian under the title Jug Basisht,
which perfectly demonstrates its universal appeal. The psychological and mystical truths it contains resonated completely across religious and cultural boundaries.
It profoundly influenced Islamic Sufi mystics too.
Because they recognize the exact same truths about the dissolution of the ego in union with the divine.
Let us dive into the actual psychological mechanics of the text. Vashistha outlines the 7 bhumikas, which are essentially the 7 sequential stages of spiritual knowledge.
It is a highly precise, systematic progression.
Can you walk us through this cognitive roadmap? Because reading it felt like looking at a blueprint for dismantling human anxiety.
See, Vashistha doesn't just say, be enlightened. He provides the steps. Stage 1 is supecha. This translates to the longing for truth.
So just wanting to know.
It is the moment you wake up and realize the rat race is unfulfilling. The seeker actively begins distinguishing between what is permanent and what is fleeting and starts disciplining their physical and mental habits.
Okay, that makes sense.
Stage 2 is vikarant. This is right inquiry. It is not enough to just want the truth, you have to study it. The seeker reflects deeply on what they have learned from texts and teachers, constantly questioning their own assumptions.
So stage 1 is desire, stage 2 is active study. What is stage 3?
Stage 3 is tanumanasa. This means the thinning out of mental activities.
Ah, so this is where the mental chatter starts to quiet down.
Exactly. The mind stops being endlessly distracted by the many fragmented anxieties of the world and begins to focus intensely on the one underlying reality. The mental static fades.
I think a lot of people are stuck trying to get to stage 3.
Oh, definitely. It is very hard. Stage 4 is sattvapati, the attainment of reality. At this stage, the yogi actually experiences the truth. They become a Brahmavid, a knower of Brahman.
How does the world look to them at this stage?
The world feels like a dream, but there is still a very slight lingering consciousness of duality. a tiny separation between the observer and the observed.
So they are almost there.
Stage 5 is asasakti. This is total detachment. Here, the person is completely unaffected by anything external.
But they still participate in the world.
Yes, they still perform their daily duties in the world, they interact with people, but without any sense of emotional entanglement, anxiety, or personal agenda.
Yeah.
Stage 6 is padartha abhavana. This is profound. It is the non-cognition of objects. The cognitive boundary between the self and the world completely dissolves. The person performs tasks automatically, flawlessly, but without any egoic sense of, I am doing this.
That is hard to even conceptualize.
And finally, stage 7, tuya. This is perpetual, unbroken samadhi, the ultimate state of liberation, where the person is entirely merged with universal consciousness while still inhabiting a physical body.
You know, looking at those 7 steps, it's essentially a cognitive unlearning process, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You start in the early stages by aggressively seeking knowledge, reading, acquiring information. But you end the journey by completely dissolving the very boundaries of your own mind.
It is the ultimate paradox of spiritual seeking. You have to build a very sturdy raft of knowledge and discipline to cross the turbulent river of the mind.
But once you cross it,
Once you reach the other shore, you cannot carry the raft with you. You have to drop the very knowledge that saved you to walk freely.
and the person who achieves this final state, who walks freely on that other shore, is called a jivan mukta, the liberated person.
The living liberated.
The text describes the traits of a jivan mukta, and I found this section so deeply moving. A jivan mukta is completely unaffected by joy or pain. They don't flinch at disaster, and they don't lose their minds over sudden wealth.
They remain perfectly even.
They are indifferent to holy waters or grand religious sacrifices, meaning they no longer need any external rituals because their entire existence is a ritual.
They act like a playful child among children, a vibrant youth among youth, and a wise elder among elders.
And most importantly, they possess absolutely no trishna, no thirst, no craving for anything, not even a craving for salvation.
Because you cannot crave what you have already become, no. They're completely, radically, uncompromisingly content in the present moment exactly as it is.
There is this one specific quote from the text regarding the mindset of the Jivan Mukta that I highlighted heavily because it completely subverts what we think of as ancient tradition.
Let us hear it.
The text says, "Even a young boy's words are to be accepted if they're words of wisdom, else reject it like straw, even if uttered by Brahma the Creator."
I want you to really pause and let the gravity of that statement sink in.
It is massive.
In a deeply traditional, hierarchical, ancient society that venerates age, lineage, and divine authority above all else, Vashistha is teaching Prince Rama that truth is the only ultimate authority.
Not age, not social status.
Not even the literal creator god of the universe. If a child speaks an objective truth, you bow to it. If a god speaks a falsehood, you throw it away like garbage.
It is radical, uncompromising critical thinking.
Yeah.
It is completely anti-dogmatic. It is basically saying, do not follow me blindly, follow the truth.
It is the ultimate intellectual freedom. He is arming Rama with a mind that cannot be manipulated by authority or illusion.
So Prince Rama sits there, absorbs all this ultimate philosophical truth, and his depression lifts. He reaches this state of absolute clarity. But, and here's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
How does he actually use this cosmic philosophy when the real world comes crashing down on him? Because, spoiler alert for the Ramayana, Rama's life does not stay peaceful.
Far from it.
He is exiled, he goes to war, he loses almost everything. Does he just sit under a tree and say, "It is all an illusion"?
This is exactly where we must bridge the gap between ancient metaphysical philosophy and highly practical modern application. Because Rama does not sit under a tree.
Right, and this pivots us perfectly to our final source, which is a fascinating academic paper from the International Journal of Management and Social Science Research Review titled Management Lessons from Ramayana, authored by Dr. Ankur Pat.
This paper asks the exact question we are asking, actually. How does the mythology of the Ramayana translate into actionable principles for modern corporate management?
And the connecting tissue here is Vashistha. Rama's entire leadership style, his ability to navigate unimaginable crises, is the direct, applied result of sage Vashistha's psychological mentorship.
Vashistha didn't teach Rama to be apathetic. He taught him how to act effectively, decisively, and ethically in the chaotic physical world, precisely because his internal world was perfectly still.
Let us flow through how this actually plays out in the epic, and how Dr. Bhatt maps it to modern boardrooms. Let us start with the ultimate corporate nightmare, crisis management.
A very relevant topic.
In the epic, the crisis is that Rama's wife, Sita, is violently kidnapped by the powerful demon king Ravana. Rama is in exile, he has no army, he has no kingdom, and his wife is gone.
This is a scenario where 99% of people would experience a complete emotional breakdown. They would panic or charge blindly into danger and get killed.
But Rama, heavily utilizing the Parada Abhavana stage, the non-reactive state Vashistha taught him, does not panic.
He feels the grief, but it does not paralyze his intellect.
He calmly evaluates his severe lack of resources. He realizes he cannot fight Ravana alone. So he systematically sets out to build an alliance, eventually rallying the entirely unconventional Vanara army.
The monkey army. The application for modern managers here is so clear.
Yes, during a massive corporate crisis, say a sudden market crash, a catastrophic PR disaster, or a total supply chain failure, the instinct is to panic, assign blame, or make impulsive, reactive decisions.
And Dr. Bhatt's paper points out that those panic-driven reactions are almost always fatal to the organization. A true leader must maintain the equilibrium of a jivan mukta.
Observe the disaster clearly without being emotionally consumed by it.
Assess the available resources logically, and build the necessary alliances to address the problem methodically.
And in the difference between reacting and responding. And a key part of responding effectively involves mastering communication, which brings us to another massive organizational risk highlighted in the epic.
Yes, the catastrophic risk of miscommunication.
The paper zeroes in on the tragic story of Bali and Sugriva. These two were brothers, incredibly close, but they became bitter, lethal enemies over one incredibly simple misunderstanding.
It is a textbook case of poor communication destroying an alliance.
Exactly. So Bali goes into a deep cave to fight a powerful demon, and he tells his brother Sugriva to wait outside and guard the entrance.
Sugriva waits for over a month.
Suddenly, a massive stream of blood flows out of the cave, and he hears demonic roaring, but no sound from his brother. Sugriva assumes Bali is dead.
Naturally.
To trap the demon, he seals the cave with a massive boulder and goes back to assume the throne. But Bali wasn't dead. He killed the demon, couldn't get out, and assumed Sugriva had deliberately trapped him to steal the crown.
And when Bali finally breaks out, the two brothers go to a brutal war.
The organizational lesson is stark. A lack of clear, transparent communication creates a vacuum, and human beings always fill that vacuum with the worst possible assumptions.
In a corporate setting, when departments operate in silos, when executives don't explain the why behind their decisions, you breed toxic rivalries and immense paranoia.
Assumptions are the enemy of effective teamwork. Rama, contrasting this, communicates his vision to his army with absolute clarity.
And speaking of that army, Rama's approach to team building and motivation is a masterclass.
He has to build an invasion force from scratch. He doesn't have highly trained human soldiers. He has a highly diverse, unconventional coalition of monkeys and bears.
But he succeeds monumentally because he possesses the ability to recognize individual latent strengths. He is a master of talent identification.
Exactly. Take Hanuman, for instance. Hanuman is infinitely powerful, but due to a childhood curse, he literally forgets his own capabilities.
He doesn't know he can leap across the ocean.
Rama doesn't scold him for being hesitant. He, along with Jambavan, continuously motivates Hanuman, reminding him of his inherent potential until Hanuman actually believes it and executes the leap.
And Rama constantly offers recognition and rewards for his team's efforts.
If you map this to modern management, a manager today rarely, if ever, gets to pick a perfectly homogeneous, flawless team of superstars.
You have to manage the team you have.
True leadership isn't wishing for better employees. It is recognizing the unique, sometimes hidden capabilities of each individual team member.
It is about fostering an environment where they are motivated to apply those specific strengths toward a common organizational goal. You have to remind your team of their own power.
And you can only do that if you possess genuine empathy and emotional intelligence. Rama forms incredibly deep, authentic emotional connections with his allies.
He doesn't treat them like disposable contractors, actually.
No. When Sugriva is grieving, Rama weeps with him. When Hanuman returns successfully, Rama embraces him physically.
And perhaps most tellingly, consider Vibhishana.
Yes, who is the biological brother of Ravana, the ultimate enemy.
When Vibhishana defects to Rama's camp, Rama accepts him with total trust, ignoring the immense paranoia of his own advisors.
Emotional intelligence, or EQ, is the critical factor that separates a mere boss from a transformational leader. Rama's deep empathy builds absolute, unbreakable loyalty.
When your team knows without a doubt that you genuinely care about their personal well-being and their honor, their commitment to the organization's goals increases exponentially.
They aren't fighting for a paycheck. They were fighting for the leader. And finally, the paper highlights what I think is the most profound lesson: humility in leadership. This is my absolute favorite example from the entire epic.
It is a brilliant moment.
After the massive apocalyptic war is over, after Ravana is finally defeated and is lying on the battlefield, taking his last breaths, Rama does something incredibly counterintuitive.
He calls his brother Lakshmana.
And he tells him to go over to the dying Ravana and learn statecraft and diplomacy from him.
It is a stunning moment because despite being the antagonist, despite having kidnapped Rama's wife, Ravana was widely acknowledged as an incredibly learned scholar.
He was an unmatched devotee of Shiva and a brilliant administrative genius who built an empire of gold.
Rama's ego is so entirely dissolved that he can separate the man's sins from his intellectual value.
But Lakshmana fails the assignment at first. He walks over and stands right by Ravana's head, puffed up, full of the arrogance of the victorious conqueror, waiting for the dying demon to speak.
And Ravana completely ignores him.
Yes. Lakshmana goes back to Rama and complains, "He won't speak to me." Rama looks at him and explains, "If you want to learn from someone, you do not stand at their head as a master. You stand at their feet as a student."
So Lakshmana goes back, drops his ego, approaches respectfully, stands by Ravana's feet, and only then does Ravana open his eyes and share his ultimate wisdom on politics and leadership.
The application here for anyone leading an organization is profound, isn't it?
100%. A truly great leader learns from absolutely everyone. You learn from your mentors, yes, but you also must be humble enough to learn from your fierce competitors.
Your adversaries, and especially from your past failures.
Hubris, the belief that you know everything because you won the last battle, is the death of organizational growth.
Effective managers must act with a radical humility towards all stakeholders if they want to continuously adapt and improve.
It is an essential trait.
What is really beautiful looking back at all of this is that Vashista's psychological teachings in the Yoga Vasistha didn't turn Rama into a passive, floating observer of the universe.
They didn't make him apathetic to the suffering of the world.
They turned him into an incredibly grounded, deeply empathetic, and ruthlessly strategic CEO of his own destiny.
That is the ultimate synthesis we have been talking about. He achieved total internal nirvana, the quieting of the mind, which is exactly what allowed him to execute his external dharma flawlessly, without being crippled by his own ego or fear.
Which brings our deep dive beautifully full circle today. We have tracked the legacy of Sage Vashistha across an almost impossibly vast landscape.
We started in the deep, muddy, fragrant forests of the Meghalaya border, looking at the architectural mashup of the Vasistha ashram.
We looked up to the cosmic navigation of the Saptarshi in the night sky. We waded through the fierce magical battles between material armies and the spiritual providence of Kamdenu.
We read through the groundbreaking legal frameworks of the Dharma Sutra and unpacked the intense psychological unlearning of the Yoga Vasistha.
And finally, we ended up right in the middle of a modern corporate boardroom, analyzing crisis management and emotional intelligence.
If there is one core takeaway for you from all these wildly diverse sources, it is simply this: knowledge is totally useless if it isn't applied.
Very true.
Vashistha's ultimate legacy across all these centuries is showing us that deep, unshakable spiritual peace and highly effective dynamic action in the real world are not opposites.
They are not mutually exclusive.
They are, in fact, two halves of the exact same reality. You must have the internal stillness to make the right external moves.
Yes. The inner quiet allows for the outer precision. And that leaves me with a lingering thought, something for you to really chew on as you go about your day.
What is that?
We talked at length about how the Vasistha Dharma Sutra was the very first text in Indian history to mandate the use of written evidence, pulling society out of the unreliability of oral memory and creating a tangible record of truth.
Yes.
And we talked about how the Saptarshi constellation literally guides ships through the absolute dark. It makes you wonder, actually. Look at the world we live in right now. Look at the massive permanent digital footprints we are leaving behind every single second.
The emails, the social media posts, the corporate slacks, the code we write.
What kind of Dharma Sutra are we writing for the generations that will look back at us 1,000 years from now? When they read our written evidence, are we leaving behind a legacy of reactive chaos, toxic miscommunication, and unchecked ego?
Or are we, like the Jivan Mukta, actively learning to navigate our own muddy waters with clarity, verifiable truth, and untroubled peace?
Because right now, the X-ray machine is broken for us too. The world is complex, and we have to decide, deliberately, what kind of pattern we are leaving in the sky for the people who come after us.
A profoundly important question to take with us into the future, no.
Thank you so much for diving deep with us today. We genuinely hope you are leaving with a slightly clearer view of the stars and a deeper understanding of the ground beneath your feet. Until next time.